Okay, I've tried to start this video 2 other times. This is my 3rd attempt, and I think my dishwasher is finally stopped to where I can actually record this video without worrying about the dishwasher in the background. Okay, so this is gonna be just a chill chat about the best show ever, Avatar: The Last Airbender. And specifically why I personally think the 2nd season is most people's favorites. Because I've heard that a lot. I think that's a pretty kind of common opinion that people think the 2nd season is the best. And I would agree. I do definitely think it's probably the show's strongest point. But I've never really heard anyone talk about why they think the 2nd season's the best. And I'm sure people have been talking about it somewhere and I just personally haven't seen it, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to give my 2 little cents, and then, I don't know, maybe at the end I'll kind of go into depth about why I stand firm in my belief that Avatar: The Last Airbender is the best show ever, because it is a completely biased and personal opinion, reasoning, I don't know, the words. But we'll start with the first part, which is why I think season 2 is the best. And this is going to be like a pretty quick kind of thought process I have, because I can say it in literally one sentence. Season 1 is world building, season 2 is character development, and season 3 is action / fight the bad guy. So in the first season, if you've seen the show, which I guess moving on from this point, just to be fair, I'll say spoiler warning for the whole show, but hopefully that should be obvious. Hopefully that's obvious, because I'm going to be talking about why the 2nd season's the best, and so in order to do that, I'm going to have to spoil all 3 seasons. So if you haven't seen the show, go do the thing. It just recently, and I say just recently, it's been back on for like months, but it is back on Netflix. If you want to watch it, you can go watch it on Netflix and then come back. We can talk about the amazingness that is the whole show. So, kind of going into a bit more description of what I was talking about. Season 1 is pretty much dedicated solely to world building. The whole season is set up in like a adventure of the week, a new location of the week. It's literally they go to a new place, a new location each week. They meet new people. They learn about and then we by default as the audience learn about this place and these people. And then at the end of the episode, they move on. There's not a lot of character growth or development in this first season from our main group, Aang, Sokka, Katara, or Zuko. They're all pretty... Basically who they are by the end of season 1 is the same as who they are by the end of the beginning. Who they are at the end of season 1 is the same as who they were at the beginning, except for probably Aang, just because, and the only thing that changed about him was he is now in a world that's 100 years older than the one he left before he went to the iceberg, and he has accepted the fact that he's the Avatar. But he does that in like, I don't know, the end of episode 2 or 3. So that's kind of still set in stone pretty early on in the season. And they do spend the whole, like I've been meandering around the past, I don't know, 5 minutes. They spend the whole first season just showing us the world, basically. And then season 2 rolls around and they say, okay, we've shown you this expansive world, this expansive place that these characters live in. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take all the main characters, put them in one location where they will stay the entire season, and develop them as characters. So now everything's kind of flipped, because whereas, like I said previously, in season 1, it's a adventure of the week, new location of the week, meet new people every week. Season 2 actually slows that down in that all the main characters, the gang Aang, Sokka, Katara, and now Toph, they all settle in the Earth Kingdom, and Zuko and Iroh do as well. And they spend the entire time in the Earth Kingdom, and in doing so, they're able to flesh out the characters more. So we can kind of get, in season 2, I think what resonates with people and why a lot of people say it's their favorite is because we're able to dive deeper into the characters, so we actually get a better understanding of like their backgrounds, their character motivations, kind of how they really think and feel about stuff. And yeah, I think that's, I don't know, it's an interesting shift because the show literally does kind of flip on its head, going from being nothing but world building in season 1 to nothing but character building in season 2. And then season 3, I think another common opinion is that season 3 is people's least favorites, and that's because in season 3 it's just, oh, we have to fight the bad guy. It admittedly does have that really good Footloose inspired episode where Aang goes to the Fire Nation school and decides to host a dance party, that I read somewhere that whole episode was loosely inspired by Footloose. It does have that episode, which is really great, but yeah, I think the reason a lot of people say that it's the worst season is because it's just like oh, let's go to the Fire Nation and fight the bad guy. Which compared to the other 2 seasons, which are, hey, let's showcase and build this interesting world, versus, and also like, hey, let's showcase and expand these interesting characters, oh, let's fight the bad guy. So yeah, that's been my very long-winded and repetitive explanation as to why the second season's the best. Yeah. It feels really long-winded and repetitive because, like I said at the beginning of the episode, I can literally say this in one sentence. Season 1 is world building, season 2 is character development, season 3 is action / let's fight the bad guy. So, like, of those 3 options, obviously character development, well, I mean, okay. I was gonna say, of all those 3 options, obviously character development would be the most interesting. And like, that's true for me personally, and I'm assuming by the general common opinion that season 2 is the best, a lot of people agree with that. But there might be some people, like, I know there's some people that prefer world building over character development, so maybe they like season 1 more. Or other people that really like action, so season 3 to them is the best. But yeah, it's just a great show. Like, it's such a classic. And I mean, maybe I'm saying it's a classic because it was airing and on television whenever I was growing up, whenever I was a kid. So this is the only show that I can say I grew up watching. And I guess now this is going to be the transition into me talking more about my personal relationship with the show, because I do have such a close tie to it, as it were. But I guess very quickly I wanted to say, just off the top of my head, some of my favorite episodes, and also generally why I think the show is so good. So why I think the show is so good is because it is a kid's show. Obviously, this is news to no one, but I've never really seen a kid's show done quite like this, except for maybe Gravity Falls, and I'll explain that in a second, where it's a kid's show, but it never felt like it was talking down to the audience. And Arcada from Glass Reflection kind of discussed this similarly in his video about Avatar The Last Airbender, which, if you haven't seen that video, or if you don't watch his channel, go do that thing, because is good channel, is anime channel. If you're interested in anime reviews / discussions, go check him out. Side tangent aside, he also kind of talked about this, so I might incidentally paraphrase him, but I'm going to try not to, is a lot of kids shows, whenever they're trying to teach lessons to their audience, they definitely come across as, we are preaching to you, we're talking down to you, we need to instill these lessons in you, and it will become very obvious in the episode that we are doing that. Avatar never really did that. There was never like a reflective point at the end of each episode where the characters, and this is where I'm paraphrasing Arcada, but where the characters sat around and talked about what they learned at the end of each episode. It was literally like the characters go through this thing, they experience whatever happened in the episode, and then we get to see by their reactions and how they develop and grow as characters kind of what the show is trying to show the kids what's right and wrong. And I think it did that really well. That's why I think someone like me, who, as I said, like grew up with the show, I was watching it whenever I was like a little kid, and I loved it. And I can still to this day watch it and love it just because it's a little more nuanced in how it treats and how it handles the lessons it's trying to teach and convey to the audience. Another thing is something that I also kind of thought similar with Mulan, the animated movie Mulan, is that's also a kids movie, but it's about a war, and it does not skimp on that fact. Like there are scenes. Remember, like the ending of the scene, A Girl Worth Fighting For, where they show up to this war zone and there's just carnage everywhere. Or that scene wherever they find two spies and the main bad guy, whose name is escaping me at the moment, oh geez, whatever, he's like, hey, you two, go tell your emperor that I'm not scared of you, that I'm ready, I'm here to fight. And then they run away, and he's like, oh, how many people does it take to send a message? Just one. And then it kind of crossfades out, but it very heavily implies what happens. Like, that's a kid's show, but it's also about a war. And I think it balances that kind of line of what can we show and what can't we really well. And I think Avatar does that really well too, because it's also about a war, kind of a little more in the a little more broadly speaking, but it is about a war. And I don't know, it never felt like, to me, the show was dumbed down because it was a kid's show. And this is kind of why I say I felt like Gravity Falls is another show that's similar, because it's also a kid's show that even adults love, because it's just so nuanced in kind of how it conveys things, and it never really feels like it's dumbed down because it's a kid's show. I don't know, I guess I don't really see a lot of shows like that. I guess other mentions might be Star vs. the Forces of Evil, even though I haven't finished it yet, so my opinion might change. And like Kipo and the Age of the Wonder Beast, which is a show I just recently finished and I'm absolutely in love with. Oh my gosh, it's so good. But yeah, I don't know, it's just it treated its audience with respect, I guess. They were like, hey, we know you're kids, but we're not going to dumb down the show and the story we want to tell just because our age demographic is a little younger. Now, I guess just for fun, I can say a couple of my favorite episodes, because I definitely have one. And I love it so much, I don't remember what it's named. I think it's called The Storm. But it's the episode where that Sokka goes to work with a fisherman because they're like, hey, we need money, all of a sudden, because that's relevant. And then Aang gets kind of told off by the fisherman, because the fisherman is like, oh, if you're the Avatar, then where have you been, and why haven't you been doing your job, and you abandoned us when we needed you. And so Aang obviously gets really upset by that, because he is like that's kind of a sore spot for him. So he runs away to a cave, and Katara somehow finds him, and we finally get the backstory of how Aang ran away from the monastery? He ran away from his home and ended up in the iceberg. Hey, so I just wanted to add something real quick that I completely forgot to mention in the original video, and I think right here is as good a spot as any to put it. In the episode I'm referencing right here, a part of the story that I completely forgot was the fact that we also get Zuko's backstory with how he got his scar and started his whole honor-bound quest for the Avatar. Something that I completely forgot to mention in the whenever I was recording this was how they did the parallels between Aang and Zuko, because they did it in so many different ways. They did it in the storytelling. Like in this episode, we get to see both Aang and Zuko's backstories. They did it in editing choices, because there were multiple times throughout this show that they would be focusing on either Aang or Zuko, and then they would crossfade to, like, okay, let's say they were focusing on Zuko, they would crossfade to Aang, and they would be the framing and angling would be in the exact same position, and it would just show how similar these characters are, even if they are also at the same time very different. I saw there's a post about this on Pinterest, because it just encapsulates this perfectly. I'll see if I can find a screenshot of it and put here-ish. Um, but that's something else that I thought was really done well in the show, and it was another aspect of the show that just completely blew me away. So, that's all I wanted to say. Back to the regularly scheduled programming. But I really like that, because I really like how almost angry he gets. Because one of the things I really love about Aang as a character is he's a pacifist. You know, he was raised by monks. He was raised that violence is never the answer, and he lives that. He tries in every situation, even in how he fights, to be as like non-aggressive, non-violent as possible. And that's something that I really respected and admired about his character, especially since he is a young child. That's shows a great amount of maturity for someone of any age, honestly, to be able to kind of put their ego aside and, you know, take the high road, which he does repeatedly. But I really liked that, like I do. That's honestly one of the reasons that I was kind of scared to watch Legend of Korra, because I knew that Korra was essentially the exact opposite. But the flip side of that is that it was also interesting to see him display strong emotions like he does in this episode, The Storm, because he gets angry at himself for honestly something he can't control, like the fact that he was frozen in an iceberg for 100 years. Obviously, that's not exactly something that he consciously decided to do, so he can't really blame himself for it, but he does. And to see him get angry, and he even, and I'm pretty sure this was in season 1. Yeah, this was in season 1. He even kind of fire bends a little bit, because at one point he gets really angry. He was like, the world needed me and I wasn't there. He like stands up, turns around, throws his hands out like that, and the fire like goes up. I guess you could argue that maybe was airbending, but to me it looked more like firebending. So like he's firebending, which is not something he can do at this point in the show. That's how just like he is at the moment. And little scenes like that where he kind of let his emotions out in a way, because he's also one that more tends to not I know I'm going to say this, and then there might be people that are like, no, you're wrong. There's so many examples of this, but to me, he mostly tried to keep his strong emotions a little reined in. And so to see scenes like that where he let it out a little bit, it was just cathartic in a way. And I don't know, it's just the whole story with him. And like another scene that really sticks out to me is whenever they're flying on Appa and Katara and Sokka first found out that he's the Avatar. And Katara was like, why didn't you tell us you were the Avatar? And he just says, because I never wanted to be. And you can so clearly see the shame and the guilt that he's feeling, just in his body language, honestly. The storytelling with him and his internal conflict with the responsibility of being an Avatar, conflicting with the fact of he's just a 12-year-old kid, was unparalleled in my opinion. That episode is also my favorite because the whole subplot of Sokka with the fisherman is just hilarious, because the whole thing is like there's a big storm coming in and they're trying to man the boat to keep it from sinking. And Sokka at one point just goes, "I'm too young to die." And then the fisherman is like, "I'm not, but I still don't wanna." That to this day makes me crack up so much. So that one's probably my favorite episode, just because that scene in particular of Aang talking with Katara in the cave just sticks out in my mind every time I think about it as being so powerful, and it gives me chills. Let's see, some other favorite episodes. The Secret Tunnel episode is really good. I don't know. I'm trying to think of episodes from each season. So for season 1, I'd probably say the storm. It's season 1 / overall, I'd probably say the storm. For season 2, I'm honestly trying to think, because it has been a while since I've seen the show. I've seen it multiple times growing up, but it's been a good probably couple of years since I've last seen it. So I'm trying to distinguish the 3 seasons in my head. Honestly, in season 2, I think my favorite, this isn't really even an episode, but my favorite plot line was whenever he got, Azula zapped him, and then he had that scar on his back that episodes later, whenever he got into a fight and that got hit, it triggered something with his Avatar state. Also, obviously, season 2, Zuko's redemptive arc, unparalleled. The Zuko's redemptive arc, you will not find another character with a better redemptive arc, and you can quote me on that. It's just so good because it takes all season, and it's not a fully progressive travel. I don't know, it's got its ups and downs. My favorite episode is probably when he gets so internally conflicted that he actually becomes physically sick, physically ill. That is over dramatic as all get out, whenever he's yelling at the thundering sky, talking to his dad of like, "You've always struck me down before, so go ahead and do it again," because he's trying to learn how to redirect lightning, and he's just like had it with himself, and I'm fully convinced that he doesn't care one way or another what happens to him in that moment. The episode where he's traveling alone and he keeps repeating to himself and having flashbacks of Azula always lies, and he ends up meeting that little boy and they become friends, but then the little boy ends up turning on him whenever he finds out that he's from the Fire Nation, even though he defended their town from the guy that had been like tyrannical towards them for the longest time. That was an amazing episode that will give me chills. Just, I don't know, Zuko's whole redemptive arc is amazing because they're able to really flesh it out and take a whole season. And I said it's the best redemptive arc ever, and I mean that. And honestly, the only character development that even comes remotely close in my mind is Yona from Yona of the Dawn. Not because she has a similar redemptive arc, because she doesn't, because she was never the antagonist. It's just that her character development takes the entire season, and it's not just done in the span of an episode or 2 or a montage. It's literally a slow burn starting from episode 1 going to the end of the season, and for you to see how she progresses. And I could make a whole other video about why we need a season 2 of the Yona of the Dawn, and I really hope that we do get it, because that's such a good show. That's such a good other show, but I could make a whole other video about that. I guess let me know if you want that video, because I could rant about that for a long time as well. But so Zuko's redemptive arc is probably my favorite part of season 2. Season 3, the aforementioned Footloose episode, that's great. Katara's arc in season 3 is really good too, and another scene that'll give me chills is the scene, I don't remember what episode it's in, but Sokka and Toph are talking about Katara, and unbeknownst to them, Katara is swimming in the water, because Katara's in the water, but then like they're kind of sitting on top of a cliff that's directly above the water, so Katara can hear them perfectly. And Sokka says something to the effect of, I don't remember what our mother looked like, and if I ever tried to picture my mother, I see Katara. That scene gives me chills. That's really good, and I'm fairly certain it's in season 3, so that can count. I don't know, it's just so interesting to me, just structurally speaking, because most shows don't have an arc that carries through the entire story. A good example of this being Avatar's direct successor, Korra, which Korra has a new villain every season, which I feel like is more typical for TV shows. They'll have a new storyline, a new story arc, a new villain, whatever, what have you, every season, more or less, give or take. Please don't go into the comments and be like, well, this show doesn't, as I know other shows, not every show is like that, but I feel like for the majority of shows over here in the West, that is par for the course. And I mean, even shows like Kipo, I would have to say, are guilty of this, because the main antagonist, she's not introduced at first. She's not introduced till the middle of season 2. Whereas the Fire Lord and the war that's going on is introduced in the opening credits of Avatar. My phone's about to die. I gotta go get a charger. Hang on. Okay, I had to switch to the other side of the couch so I could plug my phone up. What was I saying? Oh yeah, and the war is introduced in the opening credits of Avatar, so it's just something that I haven't really seen in any other TV show do before. And I think more should, because I think it shows. It really paid off. It shows. It's still a classic to this day. People love it to this day. And it's, oh man, going on like 2 decades old. But, yeah. I just, really, this is a super self-indulgent video, but I just really wanted to make it because I've wanted to just gush about Avatar for the longest time, because it is my favorite show. I grew up watching it. I have so many memories of watching it at my grandparents' house, of watching it at my dad's work. Like, the pilot episode was just on TV, and I was watching it in the office, and then I was also babysitting someone's dog for some reason, because someone thought it was a good idea to leave child me in charge of an animal. And then, so I would watch the show, and then whenever commercials came on, I would take the dog on a walk outside, and then after a couple minutes, when I thought the commercials would be over, we'd go back in and keep watching the show. I remember whenever it was on Netflix years ago, watching it with my stepbrother, and then my stepmom being like, oh hey, you can watch this all day, but after watching an episode, I would like for y'all to pause after every episode and do kind of something more active, so you're not just sitting in a chair staring at a computer screen all day. I remember living with my aunt during a summer a few years ago and buying the DVDs and watching them for the millionth time at her house. And then that was also the first time I decided to watch Legend of Korra, because I watched this really awesome edit on YouTube that included clips from there, and I was like, well darn, now I have to. So I went and watched those DVDs, and I was actually really blown away, and I could make a whole other video about why I was blown away by Legend of Korra, even though now I still think it's really not that good of a show. I could talk about how I went to a bookstore and I was buying a Natsu Pop Funko doll, and that ended up that resulted in me having like a 10-minute conversation with the sales clerk about anime, and she asked me if I thought Avatar was anime or not, and I was super excited because I'd actually thought about this because I'm a nerd, and I was like, well, I actually have thought of this interesting term that I've never heard anyone use before, which is American anime, because while yes, Avatar was made in the West by Westerners for a Western audience and channel, so it doesn't really feel right to call it anime. It so clearly and obviously is a love letter to anime and that entire culture. So I was like, why can't we just call it an American anime and everyone can be happy with that? Because I think that kind of settles both sides of the argument. But I've never heard anyone come up with this idea, and I think it's a good one. So I just have so much fondness and love for the show, and if you think I'm being a little too overdramatic, trust me, I am aware. But I have so much love and adoration for this show and what I've seen it do differently than other TV shows, and how it has grown with me, because like I said, this is the one show that I can say I grew up watching. I can't say that about a lot of other TV shows. This is the only one I have concrete memories watching it in my childhood for years and years and years. I don't really have that with any other show, so it's just got a special place in my heart because of that. And because I still think it's as good today when I'm 22 as whenever I was 12, as whenever I was 7 watching the show. And I could go on about the characters, about how I love Aang is actually kind of a passive protagonist, and that's not something you really see a lot. How Sokka, his redemptive arc, which doesn't get talked about a lot because it's so beautiful, and Katara having to essentially become a mom to her brother after their dad left for war and their mom died, and it was kind of just them, and so she had to kind of take on that role of caregiver when she was a child, of Zuko having to come to terms and accept the fact that his parents' acceptance of him does not equal acceptance in general, and him having to come to terms with the fact that he has to accept himself no matter what his family or his parents think of him, because he can't define himself by their values all of his life. He has to learn to stand on his own values, and how he has Uncle Iroh for that. And I read something somewhere that I think is beautiful and heartbreaking, that in the earlier seasons Uncle Iroh purposefully acted kind of a bit goofy and kind of like an idiot, because he was just trying to get his nephew to laugh after he had been through so much for a child. And I could go on a whole rant about Iroh being one of the best characters to ever grace media. I could go on about Azula and how a 14-year-old is more terrifying than her emperor father, and how her arc in season 3 is actually really well done, and how she became so obsessed with power it actually drove her to insanity. About Toph having to be so brisk and tough and stubborn because she had to learn to stand on her own 2 feet, because in the environment she grew up in, that was obviously not something that she was going to be able to do. She wanted independence. She wanted to be able to stand on her own 2 feet, and that's not something her parents thought she was capable of. So they were trying to shelter her from literally everything. And I'm not saying that's always a bad thing, but I'm just saying that in this particular instance, it was a little too much. So she had to become a little brisk and a little blunt, because that's the only way she learned how to fight for what she needed in her life. I love this show, man. I could go on forever. So please, if anyone is out there and you feel this passionately about this show or any other show, what is your Avatar? What show did for you what Avatar I'm trying to convey did for me? Because I don't think it's fair to just dismiss shows and cartoons as, oh, that's just for kids, because I would love to start a conversation in the comments with you guys, and you guys with each other, about, you know, what shows were important to you growing up and that you kind of still hold on to today, because I feel like, you know, today, or not today, but like whenever you do grow up and get a little older, it becomes a little awkward to talk about cartoons and kids shows, because, you know, obviously they're kids shows, they're cartoons, but there are still some gems being made to this day, like Gravity Falls and Kipo, that I think can and are well adored by, you know, people of all ages. And I think it's important to acknowledge that children's shows can still be good, and not just kind of something to be dismissed. That was a weird tangent I wasn't expecting to get on, but I don't know. Am I the weird one, the 22-year-old that still likes cartoons? Possibly. I'd like to think that I'm not alone in still enjoying some of these shows, because all the shows that I've talked about today, I do genuinely enjoy and think are really good. And I would like to start a conversation with anyone else that might feel the same, so... Okay, I better end this video because that's her, that's her take me on a walk growl. So I better go do that. As always, if you have any ideas or suggestions for other videos, feel free to leave that down below, because I am still new to this and could use all the help I can get. And I do want to make the stuff y'all want to watch. So I'm basically just asking y'all to spam my comment section. Just, I'm all about it. Just do it. Go for it. Please be nice and respectful. Obviously, I feel like I shouldn't have to say that. But I gotta go. I don't know what the next video I'll make is. Probably the Foxhole Court Part 3, because that's been a long time coming. But after that, I can use y'all's ideas, so feel free. Bye. Oh. We can talk about the amazingness. Callie, stop. It's literally... It's literally, they go to a new... Oh, hello. Oh, it's Callie time. Oh, it's Callie time.